Now is a very interesting time dealing with COVID, the aftermath, what the future looks like, how things have changed as a society, and how that affects the filmmaking industry as videographers, as cinematographers, video professionals, photographers as well. Weddings haven't been the same, events, sports, all of these things have been disrupted in a way that is very meaningful to a lot of people's livelihoods. And what do you do and what's the path forward? And I think when you look at this, it can be kind of depressing to think of all the limitations and the restrictions and how things have changed for the worse, where we were before and now what we have to deal with. But if you're watching this, maybe you're like me and you can look at it as an opportunity. And I would encourage you to do that. Challenge yourself to look in the ways that you can shape and adapt your business and what you do to adapt to the times in a way that may in the long run get you in a place that's better than where you are now or where you were before. The example I want to pull up is this article from ET Online. Is that Entertainment Tonight, I assume. I'm not big into the entertainment news and gossip and all that, but I thought this article was interesting, talking about the movies and television that are resuming production after a coronavirus shutdown. So this was published just a couple days ago, and they're talking about the late night shows, talking about things like The Witcher. If you watch season 1, now they're going to start back up with season 2 because that production was delayed. And you can see kind of up front, they just talk about, the show must go on. Following global shutdowns of film and television productions due to the coronavirus, which then prompted a major shuffling of release schedules. Things have been delayed. There's just chaos and people having to adapt to a changing time. I'm still waiting for Tenet to come out. I really am really excited to see Tenet, and I wish it was just on demand, but I get it. They want it to be in the theater, but come on, I'm really excited to see Tenet. Both Hollywood and the industry at large are ready to get cameras rolling again. I think a lot of us are. Maybe you have been already, or you're just getting back into it. Whatever the case is, we're at this point where things maybe are starting back up again, but it still feels a little hazy, a little murky as to what the future holds. This article says, as the world moves into the next phase of the ongoing pandemic, large-scale productions, including the Avatar sequels and Jurassic World Dominion, have announced plans to resume filming, and then below they break it down. So you can read through the article if you want, but I thought this was interesting in the fact that there's even a Wikipedia page dedicated to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on television. And this is regional, like across the globe. You can see everything that's happened. You can read through this. We're not going to read through it right now, but there's a lot of detail here. It has a Wikipedia page for the impact of this. Now, granted, everything has a Wikipedia page, but I still think that's, it's a nice consolidated place to look at it. But anyway, let's talk about the opportunities that are presented with everything that's going on. If you look at how Hollywood traditionally does production, it's big, it's expensive, there's a lot of people, really crushing work schedules and restrictions, and a lot about it is big and bloated because it's massive and it's this machine, this industry machine. When you present something like the situation we're all going through right now, that machine isn't going to get up and running maybe as smoothly as some people might expect or might hope. When you're worried about social distancing or masks and you have to deal with actors and their faces on camera and hygiene and all this stuff that people are worried about right now, it puts even more restrictions on an industry that's already bogged down by a lot of restrictions in terms of where you can film, where you can't film, who can do what. Oh, you're not qualified to move that light stand, so we need to hire another person to do it. Kind of the silly stories you hear about Hollywood. But in general, you have a big industry that's now being interrupted and having to refigure everything out. Who's at a better advantage? The independent people or the big Hollywood production studios? I think the independent people are at a better advantage. And when you look at the drought of content that may be coming, services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, HBO, these services are at record highs in terms of viewership because people are at home. They're watching content. They're not going to the movies. They're watching movies on Disney+. These services are going to be desperate for content. Meanwhile, the industry that's been supporting them for the past 10 years has now been on hiatus, and now as they move back into things, they're going to be experiencing problems. I don't take joy in that. I think it's kind of unfortunate that these things that they have to deal with all this stuff. But it is a silver lining for the people who are more independent. If you can find a way to make compelling, interesting content, given the fact that we have cameras that shoot broadcast quality cinematic 4K, 6K. If you look at the Lumix S1H, it's rated for Netflix production. A mirrorless camera, that's $4,000. I'm sure many of the other devices that you can get your hands on out there are equally as good. Movies were filmed decades ago with digital cameras that were released. 28 Days Later, famous example, right? There's many, many of those. Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I believe their first season they shot on the DVX 100. There are time and time again, there are always case studies of it doesn't always matter what it was captured on. It could be standard def, it could be HD, it could be 4K, whatever. It's about the storytelling, it's about the ingenuity and the creativity, which I think often comes from restrictions and limitations. When someone says you have no budget, you can't have actors, you can't do these things, you only have access to these locations, you have all these restrictions as an independent creator, and you're put under that pressure, amazing creativity can come from that, especially in an area where now these companies, these streaming services are going to be looking for more content. Where are the independent creators out there who are making things that are interesting and unique in terms of content? Where are those people? The people who maybe were just doing corporate work before. Maybe that corporate work has dried up and there you don't have any clients. Maybe this gives you a window of opportunity to make something in more of the short film category or series format, put it on the internet, cross your fingers, and maybe you can get discovered or you share it with the right people. Like, I don't know exactly what it's going to take for you personally to get down the path, but I know that right now, oftentimes like these, where there's big change and kind of upset in industries, are turning points where some people are able to break down those doors and get access to stuff that wasn't available before. You think of the early days of YouTube, and a lot of stars now, celebrities, even Justin Bieber came from YouTube, right? The early days when this was this brand new thing and people were creating content at home and just putting it on the internet for free. Hollywood, TV, movies, they're slow to adapt and they don't always quite get it because they're built on an industry that's been given different parameters, different restrictions. It's grown over time into something that is inherently unique and is what it is. All the people who are at home who fancy themselves as content creators as well, but maybe haven't had the opportunity, I'd say challenge yourself. Look at this like an opportunity. What can you do creatively? What restrictions working with in your current situation, your current environment, can you still find a way to make interesting content? You see this with a lot of YouTubers who have been stuck at home and they can't do their normal thing where they're travel vlogging and doing all that stuff. Sometimes those restrictions of having to stay at home can be the most rewarding creatively. And I think the same is true in terms of the potential and opportunity, not just that people are going to watch it on YouTube, but if you make something high quality and compelling, there's a chance that there might be someone who wants to buy that or work with you on something more down the road because they see, hey, you can do this and you can work with these restrictions and you can deliver content faster than these other folks who are still getting used to all the new restrictions. So it's just something to keep in mind. A lot of times we can look at situations like what's happening with the pandemic and think doom and gloom, this is awful, this is the worst, how are we going to get through this, when can we get back to the new normal or get back to the old normal? And I think try and look and find a way to say, given what we know now and how things have gone and how things are developing, we know that people are consuming digital content at all-time highs. We know that content soon will be in a drought because things have been kind of paused for 4 or 5 months. Now, is there a bunch of stuff just sitting on the shelves? Yeah, of course there is. Stuff that's been passed on and is from a couple years ago that never got published or purchased, and they'll resurrect that and put it out there and we'll say, hey, this is our new series or this is our new movie. Meanwhile, it was filmed 5 years ago. That stuff exists just sitting on a shelf somewhere. But it was passed on for a reason because it maybe wasn't, cream of the crop, top list type stuff. You look at a new situation where you need content as a streaming provider. If I'm Netflix and I go, well, I need content regularly of a high quality caliber. Where are those creators? Who are the people out there making content in this new environment and can do it cheap, or affordably, right? I'm not saying it's supposed to be like no budget, but when you look at people and their ingenuity, if you've never seen the movie Primer, I highly encourage anyone to watch the film Primer because it's just the testament of how much can be done with very, very little. Is it the best film ever? No, but it's one of my favorite films because of the spirit of independence and making content when you don't have anything and still focusing on story, delivery, execution, quality the best you can with your resources, trying your hardest with what you have, and swinging above your weight class, punching above your weight class to the point where someone will look at it and go, wow, that's really impressive with what you did with very little. Here's more. What can you do with more? What can you do with more? And that's always where you want to be. Prove yourself in this current time. Find a way to make it work. Stand out. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the answer is. That's why every one of us has our own creative spin we can put on these things. But I do want to challenge you. Find that silver lining. Find a way to look at the current situation and don't look at the negative stuff. It's there. It's obvious. It's talked about every day. Find your own mental positivity of how you can turn a bad situation into something that may end up being a benefit to you in the long run.